So thank you very much for joining us this morning for our webinar on becoming disability confident. We'll do a few introductions in a second, but just a bit of housekeeping before we start off. So I guess most of us are quite used to webinars now in the current climate, but just to let you know, for this webinar, your cameras are automatically turned off and you're automatically muted. We do have the Q&A function today, so I think most of you probably used to Zoom, but you'll see if you hover over the top of your screen, you'll get the chat function that will come up. We're using that for our Q&A today, so if I could just, as we're going through the presentation, or at the end we'll have a chance for Q&A, so do post your questions, we'd love to hear from you, and we will have a chance to answer them at the end. If there's anything particular, current as we go through, we'll pick them up as we go through, but we'll probably do most of the Q&A at the end. So if we don't answer a question that you've asked, we haven't forgotten you, we'll come back to you as we go through the presentation. So yes, thank you for joining us. This morning's presentation or webinar, we're going to be having a look at our journey to disability confidence. So just a quick sort of go through the agenda. So we're going to start with a few introductions to myself and Daniel, who are going to be taking you through today's presentation. We're then going to look at the business case for disability confidence, and I guess starting off with why would you consider this and why would you do this? We're then going to have a look at the Kier journey. So we're going to sort of talk about we're certainly not saying we've got it right, we've got it perfect, but sharing a few lessons learned from our own journey. Then we're going to touch on, I guess, the practicalities. So if you think actually from those first two bits, this is something that you would like to do, how would you go about that? And really leaving you with some next steps and top tips from what we've learned from our journey. And then, as we said earlier, an opportunity for a Q&A at the end. So that's the sort of next hour that we will take you through. So coming to have a look at introductions. So my name's Tracy Collins. It will be a bit confusing because I'm Tracy Lucas on the screen and Tracy Collins, but I've changed my name. So I'm the Talent Development and Inclusion Manager at Kier Highways, and been actively involved in our journey to become a disability confident leader within Kier Highways. Dan, am I okay to hand over to you for a quick intro?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Tracy. So my name is Daniel Cady. I work for the Business Disability Forum. So I've worked in disability inclusion for the past 10 years, and the Disability Forum, basically I'm a senior business partner, so I help to manage relationships with lots of our partner organisations who like Kier are on a journey to become disability confident. Really a bit more on Business Disability Forum itself. Basically we partner with organisations, produce an awful lot of resources to help support those organisations and generally business, well in general, to become more inclusive around disability. So whether that's through resources, through policy work, and also our Disability Smart Audit framework, which I'll go into a little more later.
Wonderful, thank you, Daniel. So handing over to yourself, if that's okay, Daniel, to sort of talk about why this is important and the business case for becoming disability confident.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's important when we're talking about disability inclusion, really to look at the breadth and the scale of disability, and to look at actually what we're talking about when we're talking about disability. If you want to go on to the next one there, Tracy. So yeah, disability as defined in the Equality Act 2010 is a physical or mental condition that has a substantial and long-term adverse effect on an individual's ability to perform normal day-to-day activities. And the next one, please. And there are three models of disability. If you want to click through, Tracy, and show all three of those. So basically, these are the three different models of disability that we find people working with. There's a charity model, which sees disabled people as unfortunate and we need to look after them. There's the medical model, which sees disabled people somehow broken and need to be fixed. And there's a social model which we work with. We encourage all of our businesses to work under, which is that disabled people are not disabled by their impairment, but by barriers that are created by society. And the next slide, please. And then so disability itself, when we think about disability, it's not always obvious. And funnily enough, just in the last 10 years, this is something that's become, I think, more understood, certainly in business and society at large, when it comes to either making changes or to start to remove some barriers. So disability is not always obvious. Visible disabilities, but then a lot of non-visible disabilities. So looking at vision impairment, hearing impairment, speech impairment, MS, cancer, HIV, all of those conditions on the right-hand side of your screen there, they will all count as disabilities within the Equality Act in 2010. And that's all stuff that businesses should be looking to support across both their customer base and their employee base as well. If you want to knock on, Tracy. So now if we start to look at the scale of disability, just looking at the UK, there's 14.1 million disabled people in the UK alone. That means there's 19% of working age adults are disabled. So that means that, you know, that there are already a lot of disabled people will be working within your organisation. And the next one, please. So yeah, the one just prior to that, don't worry, Tracy, that's fine. So 96% of disabilities are non-visible. So again, this just goes to show that, again, within your organisation, you may have an assumption of how many people are disabled, but you know, you need to collect data to be able to find out the true number of disabled people within your organisation. And the next slide, please, Tracy. Sorry, harrying you and making you jump about between them. I think the one previous to this, don't worry about going back, but was yeah, so 53 is like the average age of disability. So there's a lot of acquired disabilities as well within the workforce. And I think, again, when we're talking about a business case, these are all considerations that we have to make, because we also throw around the term disability, but this is sort of the nuts and bolts of actually what we're thinking about in terms of disability. So it can be someone that's acquiring a disability, and that's obviously very important within a workforce to think about how that workforce is going to change. And then when we come onto this slide, so 81.8% of non-disabled people are in employment, but only 53.2% of disabled people are in employment. So that obviously there's a massive gap there for disabled people wanting to be employed, but finding barriers into getting into the workforce. And just a 10% rise in the employment rate amongst disabled adults would contribute an extra 12 billion to the economy by 2030. So obviously a substantial sum that at the moment is being missed. You've probably all heard of the purple pound. So again, this is looking at the UK. The spending power of disabled people is estimated to be over 274 billion a year. So, you know, as a customer base to be tapped into, again, it's a substantial amount. So to sum all of it together into what we see really as the business case for disability inclusion, there is a massive untapped pool of talent that exists in the disabled population who are finding barriers into work. So by focusing on disability inclusion, you're ensuring that you're tapping into the full range of talent that is available. You're also building a workforce that reflects the diverse range of customers it serves and the community in which it's based. So if you remember those stats from earlier about just the number of disabled people in the UK. And if you think about that, that's disabled people, but that's also family, that's friends, all different contacts of disabled people. By bringing in disabled talent, you're also bringing in additional skills to your business. So whether that's creative thinking, British Sign Language. I worked for many years with businesses in helping to recruit autistic talent. So there's a lot going on at the moment around employment around neurodiverse and talents, and again, it's a different way of thinking, which actually brings more talent to the workforce. It brings a new way of thinking to the workforce, which actually, again, removes different barriers that you might not have even realized that are there in your own thinking within an organization. And then we talk about the improved reputation and the brand awareness. If you think about competitors and how they may well have a better disability inclusion, a better image, then we've got, I don't know, there's a stat around that 75% of disabled people and families have refused to go to certain organisations where they feel that there's been, well, basically they don't have as good an image around disability inclusion. So again, when you think about that amount of money, that amount of loyalty that can be missed by not having a good image around disability inclusion. Another factor is the risk and time resource implications of litigation. So I mentioned the Equality Act of 2010. I mean, basically an employer has an obligation to be able to offer workplace adjustments to disabled workforce, and to also make sure that they're offering disabled applicants the same opportunities as everyone else, and they're not putting up any barriers. So you'll actually run the risk of litigation by not being inclusive. And then we go back, so to that purple pound, which I think is one of the most attractive options a lot of organisations do look at. Again, the spending power. If you look globally, I mean, so there's one in 5 people in the UK are disabled. There's like over 1 billion people that are disabled in the world. So if you think about that, again, that capacity to spend within an organisation, and getting disability inclusion right also benefits others. So here the examples would be sort of elderly, expectant mothers. But actually, if you look at some of the changes just in the last year, the fact that we're now having these sorts of webinars and things that are going on online, if you look at the way that through things such as inclusion, when we've had to make changes, so again, working with autistic talent over the last 10 years as well, some of the changes that we've made within organisations have found to be an awful lot better for other people that work within that organisation as well. So we talk about disability inclusion, but actually it breeds inclusion in general within the workforce, which goes on to the last point there, which is about retention. So you're helping to create a better workplace for everyone, a more attractive workplace for applicants, but also it's likely that somewhere between 5%, 15% of any workforce has a disability or long-term condition. Why wouldn't you want to retain talented people, good workers, experience and skills? So basically by making an offer that is attractive around disability inclusion, not only are you getting those applicants in, but by concentrating on retention, it means you're keeping that experience, that talent, and that in itself is making you more attractive to the workforce of the future.
Thanks, Dan. That's really good, and a really good insight to the sort of, I guess, why would you do it, and why wouldn't you be more disability inclusive? I guess on that. So I'm going to talk a little bit now about our journey, and certainly lots of those points from Daniel resonate with us, and guess why we started to become more disability confident. And I heard, so I attended a webinar earlier in the week where they talked about us all being, I guess, temporary abled, and I quite like that spin on the head of disability, and actually thinking, I think sometimes it's easy to think, I guess that people that are disabled are minority, and talk about people always having a disability, and I think that's where a lot of people's mindsets goes to. But I really liked the thought that we're all I don't like the thought, but I think spinning it on your head around that we're all just temporary abled, I think really hit home for me. And I guess a bit of a personal story from myself. So I've recently been diagnosed with a knee condition, which means that I've sort of got a knee that's probably not going to get any better. And for the first time in my so many years, which I won't mention, I started to think, actually, I've got a long-term health condition that affects my life and won't particularly improve. And therefore, should I be ticking the disability box on the demographics. And that was quite a thought for me. I was thinking, oh God, actually, I'm now perhaps falling in that category where I'd be, ticking the box on that form. So from being very able-bodied, from always being into sport, I'm now sort of thinking, should I, would I be considering myself as disabled in the terminology of that? And I guess I thought then moved on to that to think I have to, as part of that, have an operation in January or February, which will lead me to be unable to walk for 12 weeks. So all of a sudden, I'm walking around workplaces, looking at things that I've never looked at before and thinking, oh, there's no lift in this building. And oh, actually, the boardroom here is upstairs and that's always where my meetings are. And, all of a sudden, I've got these visage of, a few people trying to help me up the stairs so I can actually get to a meeting because they're always on the first floor and there's no lift. And for me, I've started to consider things that I would never have considered before. So, I think that, when we're talking about disability, for people to have in that mindset that actually, whether it's temporary or, of a long term, at some stage during our lives, it is likely that we're all going to have a condition or a disability or something that leads us to be temporary disabled or permanently disabled on our journey. And I think that for me, once we start to think about it in that way, it certainly raises up everybody's agendas from that 10-15% of our workforce that are classed as disabled to thinking that actually probably during their working life, 95% of our workforce will be either temporary or permanently disabled. And I think that then really raises up the agenda. So why did we start our journey to disability confidence? Well, one of the things when we started this journey back in 2017 is each year we do a demographic survey of our workforce. And in 2017, I think it was a shock to us that our biggest proportion of prefer not to say from all of the characteristics was on disability. So basically our people would tell us their ethnicity, their sexual orientation, their religion, all things that for us we would think would be more, bigger proportion of prefer not to say. But alarmingly, they were all a lot less than we had. Over 11% of our workforce that even in an anonymous survey would not tell us whether they had a disability. And for us, that thought, actually, that was a worry. And only 3% were declaring a disability. And we knew from statistics that wasn't going to be the case. We weren't going to have a workforce where only 3% had a disability. So for us, we were assuming that a big proportion of the prefer not to says actually had a disability, but didn't trust us enough to tell us that. So, not only were we not going to attract a diversity of talent, but actually even our own workforce doubted if we were a disability inclusive employer. And when we started to unpick that, the majority had that fear that if they told us, we would start to manage them out of the business, that for them, we wouldn't try and help them and support them and make reasonable adjustments, but it would be the other way to a capability type exercise. So that alarmed us, and we wanted to go on a journey where we really started to help our people trust us further and really, become that inclusive employer. And we knew that, around 16% of the working age population in the UK are disabled. And like Daniel said, only around 51% of this are in employment. So we were also saying there's a really untapped talent pool there that we could attract. So for us, it made real sense to start on this journey. And to be honest, back in 2017, we didn't know where to start. So we thought actually, it was quite new, the Disability Confidence Scheme back in 2017, but we thought, why not enroll in a scheme that takes you through the journey rather than trying to do something ourselves? And equally, why not get recognition if we do get through the journey? Actually, there's a stamp here that tells both our internal employees and the market that this is something that we're passionate about. So we started with a scheme and we became a Disability employer, and level 1 is committed. So we sort of joined the scheme at committed. And I think one of the first things we realised is that we're not experts in this field. And when I come on to the top tips later, I would say, you know, get partners, get people that support you on the journey. And that's exactly what we did. We registered, as I said, as the level 1 committed, because that gave us a nice framework. It gave us a self-assessment we could start to look at areas. But you know, there is so many organisations out there who are passionate about supporting employers to become more disability confident. You don't need to go through this on your own. So there's a few examples there. We did, the Department for Work and Pensions were great. They helped us with the disability confident journey. I'll talk a little bit in a while about BASE. We joined originally Disability Rights UK. And in the last year, we've joined the Disability Business Forum, and hence why the partnership with Daniel today, because we're really using this partnership to continue to drive our journey forward. And one of the first things we did on our journey was start to raise internal awareness and gain confidence. So we did some campaigns, we did some, you know, comms, your posters, we updated our intranet, all the usual things that we would normally do. But we also started to train people, because for us, this wasn't something we wanted to just talk about. This is something we wanted to do in reality. So we did raise awareness. We focused on Disabilities and Inclusion Week. So that's a timely topic with Inclusion Week coming up next week. But we made sure that, you know, not that it was just a once a year thing, but actually it was a really good opportunity to focus on disability. And we also trained our HR professionals, because actually as we started to become more disability confident, we got more questions and we got more people wanting to come forward and tell us about their disabilities and ask for reasonable adjustments. And it was really important that we had our HR team that were able to support us with that journey. And as Dan mentioned earlier, I think what we started to do was talk about some of the things that people weren't so aware of. So, you know, there's lots of talk about invisible disabilities, about neurodiversity, but actually, did people know what that meant? And did people know, you know, even, you know, who fell into those categories? And equally, what can we do to be more inclusive? So we just sort of started to raise the conversation. And on that, we also looked at recruitment. So, you know, we did twofold really. We wanted to be more inclusive internally, but we also wanted to be more inclusive in our recruitment practices, because we were aware from our data that we weren't recruiting a diverse audience. And I think, I know Daniel mentioned it in his bit, but you don't become more inclusive from disability in isolation. If you become more inclusive around disability, it will improve all other aspects of your inclusion journey, because actually when we focused on inclusive recruitment and we focused originally on disability, all the other stats moved as well, because people were just thinking about how they became fairer and more inclusive in their practices. So as part of our review of recruitment, we reviewed the recruitment processes. There's some good reports out there. So we work in the highways industry, and Highways England had done a report on recruiting for success. There's also the McKinsey report, which is really good to have a look at. So we again sort of engage different companies to help us with that. And we've also partnered with the Kier company, who are doing our disability, our inclusive recruitment training for our line managers. So, you know, again, we looked and we thought, crikey, we train our line managers on all sorts of things. So we could train them on how to do a performance conversation. We give them lots of health and safety training. We train them on how to do a good toolbox talk. But we expect people to do recruitment. And actually, we had never given anyone any training on how to do recruitment. And for us, again, that's a big eye opener. It's such an important part. Getting the right people into our business is key for our business, but we hadn't trained our line managers on it. So that's something we did. We produced an inclusive recruitment toolkit. We looked at focusing on senior roles. We actually, you know, we have, and we still have, and it's a journey, a really low proportion of senior roles, which are from different, whether they're disabled, from BAME backgrounds, from gender diverse backgrounds. You know, as you go up the organisation, it gets less diverse. So we really wanted to focus on those senior roles. And we've also looked at role profiles. And before we looked at role profiles, we thought we had inclusive role profiles. And I don't think it's till you start to unpick that and have some training that you really, that you realise how with the best intentions, you can use language and criteria in your role profiles and in your advertisements that aren't inclusive, whether that's to disability, to gender. So that was a really big starting point for us to have a look at role profiles and see what we were doing with the best intentions. And back in, you know, it made a real difference. And this is just some stats around gender that came out of our inclusive recruitment. And the reason that we haven't yet measured disability is that we still get quite a low declaration rate on disability at recruitment. We find a high declaration rate once someone has got into the organisation, but we're still finding that it's quite low on when you recruit someone. And that's a journey, that's something that's on our latest action plan to see how do we get people more confident when they don't know us to declare. We've worked on the when they do know us. But, you know, there's just some stats there around where we could measure around gender. And, you know, we found a real big jump between what we were finding is that, you know, there was a big proportion of people being offered interviews. So we had 21% females being offered interviews, or you know, but actually we were only getting 12% offered the role. So, you know, it was a big drop because we weren't being inclusive enough. And when we'd gone through this process, we actually had 30% being offered interviews and 28% being offered a role from being gender inclusive. So it was a really good journey for us, and we know that the other stats are following. We just need to get more. We need to get more better data on that. We ran some, you know, I guess programs, and I guess you know, I don't want to say it's all about initiatives, but we did. This is an example. We also did a supportive internship, which went down really well, bringing some people with disabilities into the business. But we partnered for a company called Ways Into Work down in our South contracts. They're a British Association for Supported Employment company. And we brought on board a number of people who went through a work experience programme with us. And that had many effects. Obviously, it was great for the people that we brought on board. And at the outcome of that, we offered, we did some work experience. We did some off-site training, so they all got an opportunity to learn new skills. And actually, one of the candidates was offered full-time employment following that programme, and has since gone on to have 2 promotions since joining our organisation, so is flourishing. They would not have got a job with us without this programme. And we're still actively involved with some of the others who come and do regular work experience. And I think what we shouldn't forget is that was not just about the people we helped, but actually the people in our organisation started to learn more about disabilities and I guess, you know, people are a little bit weary. I don't want to say scared, but it probably is a bit scared of saying, crikey, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. I don't know how to support people. And this, you know, these sort of programs really started to open people's eyes to, you know, actually let's focus on what people can do and not what they can't do, and the skills that people with a different abilities can bring to the business. We also focused on mental health. And actually one of the big things that we realised from our data, so out of the 10% that we now get declare a disability within our organisation, half of them declare a mental health related disability. So as part of our journey, you know, we really focused on, I think, you know, prior to our journey, people didn't really class mental health issues as a disability. They were very much focusing on the physical disabilities. So raising awareness around mental health, you know, training people, training line managers, offering resilience training. And we launched a wellbeing strategy. So, you know, it's twofold around mental health, making sure that we have the skills to react when people have issues, but preventative about how do we help people's well-being so that they, you know, they don't that, you know, we stop or help stop them having issues in the first place. And recently, to continue our journey, we've launched an ability network in Kier. So we've focusing on disability and neurodiversity, but really want to give people with different disabilities in the organisation a collective voice, and support people within our organisation. So the network's open to those with disabilities and to allies. And what we've found is a lot of people join the network, not because they necessarily have a disability, although that's a large portion, but actually because they have a passion, because family members, children, or they've just you know, become aware of it within the workplace and want to know more. So that's something that we're on our journey with, but is really supporting us as we move forward. And just the sort of final bit. So, you know, for now, what we're really pleased of, you know, from in our journey, we've moved in 2017 from that 10% that declared a disability, or sorry, didn't declare a preferred not to say on disability. So we now only have 1.4% of our workforce that won't tell us if they have a disability. So, you know, we're really proud of that. And then we've gone from 3% declaring a disability to over 10% declaring a disability. So that's not all of the journey, but it's part of the journey, and it was certainly one of our original aims. And we've now worked through all 3 stages of Disability Confident and become a Disability Confident leader, which we're really proud of. So that's our journey. And then over to you, Dan. You'd like to talk a little bit about how do people start on their journey to become a Disability Confident?
Thank you. Yeah, it's great to hear about the progress that you've already made, Tracy. I know that you would have probably followed a fair few of these tips in your journey as well, but just to go over some of what we would recommend. So I mentioned earlier our Disability Smart Audit. That's one of the prime tools that we use with businesses, because before you start to plan what you're going to do, it's really, you need to review and be honest about where you are. The Smart Audit is one of the ways to be able to do that. So basically, we look at key business areas for us, and it's about review those areas to shape your inclusion strategy. So the 10 different areas that we look at, so we've got leadership, work placements, recruitment, retention, customers and service users, we look at procurement, communication, the built environment, and technology. Always end up having to read those out, because otherwise I will definitely miss one or say one twice. But it's across all of those areas that we see that you need that impact to be able to go on this journey. But in saying that, next point is then you need to set realistic timeframes. So again, this is all about yourselves. Set realistic timeframes. You can't address everything in 12 months. Look at where you are, look at what you can do, and actual sequence and that sort of work. Don't try and recreate everything in a short space of time, but then also don't be overawed by that. Don't let it stop you from making improvements. Key to be able to manage that, to be able to spin all of those plates, is to appoint senior for each of those components, someone who can lead on that section and can basically keep it in check. It's also something that we do an awful lot of as well, we do loads of these desktop reviews, which is to review all policies and procedures that can help support retention. So again, this is all about what you've got at the moment, who you've got within the organization, how you can improve, how you can strengthen that first and foremost. And then a large part of our work, a large part of our work is around workplace adjustments. So reviewing your approach to workplace adjustments, making sure it is fit for purpose and that people get what they require swiftly, again, this is something where you have to openly look at the work that you are doing. That can be quite often a good idea to bring in a partner, whether that's ourselves or someone else, because it can be about focus groups, it could be about talking to networks, it's about talking to people already within the organization. And as Tracy said, around their position in 2017 in Kier, you may well have had people not wanting to give honest feedback on what was going on. And that moves to the next point as well, which is to consult and involve disabled employees and customers, establish a staff network and an external stakeholder group to get customer and disabled persons feedback. Networks are, internal networks are a fantastic way to get feedback on where you are and your progress. They're not there as delivery agents, they're not there to do the work, but they're there to feedback, to keep you in check. And you also find a lot of those networks are there to sort of like internal support, to support one another within those networks. So you may find, so what Tracy was saying about building a diversity network at the moment, quite often I'll work with organizations that have a disability network, then they'll have several networks sort of under that umbrella, sort of relative to conditions. And that a lot of those will be about support. They will then feed into the larger disability network, which will be the main sort of press back to senior leaders within the organization that will do sort of like more productive sort of like change, whereas these smaller groups are about supporting those employees. And again, just to reiterate, to be honest, communicate where you are and where you want to be. So again, taking Kier as an example, about being able to say, right, obviously we're not perfect here, but we're not saying that we're going to go off and be leaders within sort of like 6 months. It's about setting those milestones, see where you are, and look for support. It should be a supported journey. It's not something that you should just be going and doing on you're not left on your own to do this. If you want to skip to the next slide, please, Tracy. So, I think it might be one more if you click through. Interesting. So yeah, I think a big thing is, so once you've done that review and when you're planning, sequencing is key. So again, first of all, look at those processes that you already have internally. Look at retention. Make sure you embed a clearly defined workplace adjustment process. Upskill key people. So whether that's to have those leaders of those business sections, or whether that's to set up those networks and to lead those networks. And then you're looking at ensuring inclusive recruitment and onboarding as well, because as bad as not being able to employ that disabled talent, you don't want people coming in and then finding out that actually it's somewhere that they want to leave within 6 months, because that can be quite common. And if you want to jump to the next one, Tracy, thanks. So yeah, I think this sort of like sums up all the hints and tips. Really, is that really you're looking to create an environment where employees will share disability information, and to do that, it needs to be open, and you need to communicate what you are trying to do and communicate your own limitations, but where you're trying to get to. That will build confidence to encourage conversations, particularly around adjustments. When we look at adjustments, there's a one key thing for me is about how we tweak the conversation around adjustments. Adjustments are quite often seen as reasonable adjustments, something that it's very much based on the individual to have to approach the organization, and it's about making an adjustment for a disability. Whereas a workplace adjustment really should be about the workplace itself saying to the employee, how can we best support you to work to your best? How can we help you be as productive as possible? So it's taking actually disability out of it in that case. It's about making sure your workforce has the capability to be able to work to the best of their ability. When you do that, and when you ask an individual sort of like, how can we best help you? That's kind of taking away the default response of no when you're asking about adjustments. And that's going back to that social model that I spoke about earlier, where it's focusing on a removal of barriers. Another one on this sort of inclusion and making sure that you're helping individuals within the workforce. Don't assume that you know the solution. What works for one person might not work for another. Disability can be complex, and people can have different disabilities and also their own personal traits. What work for one person, their life might not work for someone else. Again, to the example of this last year, where a lot of us have been working from home, it's been great for a lot of people, and a lot of people have found a new freedom away from having to commute. A lot of other people find it tricky to work within their circumstances, and they would prefer to be in the office. So just by having a particular disability doesn't mean that you're going to get the same answer from every single person. A big one, really, consult and involve disabled staff. Again, user testing, looking at policy and guidance. This goes back to those employee groups, setting up those networks, those trusted networks, and actually having senior leaders speak to those networks as well. So they feel like there is actually what they're saying is being adhered to, and there's a regular communication with sort of C-suite execs. And then that's really basically, this goes on to then how you can proactively attract those disabled candidates by being able to share these stories, to be able to share these networks and how involved your execs are. It is about, I think we've said previously already today, it's about a whole organizational approach. It's about them being able to create these positive role models and positive stories from the work that you're doing, because as Tracy's alluded to there as well, the work that they're doing at Kier is producing more and more of these stories. And so as they go on into their next step, there's an awful lot to draw on. So for instance, in terms of recruitment, you can talk about those networks that you have. And you can, funny enough, as what I was thinking when Tracy was talking about now, the possibility of acquired disability as well. It's these things around, actually now you've got even more of an open space to be able to discuss these things about whether it's an acquired disability during your time in work, and you've actually getting these more and more experiences which you can then put towards recruitment. People will sort of be able to see the sort of people that are already working at Kier, how Kier has helped to manage and support its workforce, and this all feeds back into the model of inclusion. Thanks, Tracy. I think that's all from me.
Brilliant, thank you, Daniel. So just, I guess, following on from that, to talk about the lessons that we've learned from a Kier point of view on our journey. And I think first one, as I mentioned earlier, is don't try and do it alone. Do get help and support for your journey. It is quite daunting when you start off. It can be difficult to know where to start. So get help and support, whether that's by joining an organisation or equally drawing on other organisations that have gone or are further through the journey. Certainly, at Kier here, we are more than happy to share our journey. So if anybody on the call wants to sort of contact me following today's session or at any stage and say, we're starting our journey, can you help? Then we would be more than welcome to. And I know that, as part of people's commitment to be a disability confident leader, that is something that you commit to. So anybody, if you go online on the DWP website and pull off the list of disability confident leaders, as part of their program, every one of them has committed to help others. So you can basically contact anyone on the disability confident leaders list and expect someone that will come and help and support you. And that's certainly something we would do here at Kier. So do ask and get that support. I think I would second what Daniel's mentioned there, is do involve your people. You don't need to be an expert to start this journey. And actually, in 2017, when we started the journey, very few of the people that decided to start this journey and commit to being the sort of leaders of our disability confident had any experience of disabilities themselves, or had limited experience. Some had, it was about relatives or children, etc. But it's fine, just involve people. There will be lots of people through your organisations that will want to support you on this journey and will help and give feedback and things like that. One of the first things we did was get people's to sort those from within our disability network to start reviewing things, review our communications, go on our website. How does it feel to them? You know, we asked them all to go through the recruitment process, even though they were already with us, to say, if you were coming to a job with Kier, how would it feel? You know, so get support and get people's advice from disabilities, those with disabilities and allies. I think, again, echoing what Daniel said, is don't try and take on too much at one time. So, you know, it did feel a little bit, when we did our first action plan for Disability Confident, we thought, oh my God, there is so much we want to do, we need to do. And it's easy to try and take on the world in year one, but I would say definitely don't do that. And we probably learned that the hard way in year one, where we tried to take on the world. But, you know, do look at what's important. And one of the things we did was probably, you know, use our data to what was the main issues. And for us, the two main issues was about our internal people not telling us, so we wanted to gain confidence, and our data telling us that our recruitment practices weren't very inclusive. So they were our two priorities for year one, because that's what our data told us was our main priorities. As we went through the journey, we uncovered loads of other things that needed to go onto that priority list, but we started somewhere. And I would say, you know, pick a couple of things that you want to change. And the great thing about the Disability Confident journey is they recognise that. So you get a list of things, and they only ask you to commit to one in year one. So it might say, you know, run a supported internship, work with a company that attracts disability. So there's a whole list of people or things or projects that you could do, but they only ask you to do one of them. And again, it's easy to look through the list and go, brilliant, let's do them all. But the accreditation purposely only asks you to do one, because it's doing, you know, it's starting somewhere and getting on with that. It is a constant journey. So we're now 3 years in, and we're working towards our re-accreditation of leaders in diversity. And I think, you know, part of that, we've reinvigorated our action plan, made sure that we're still on the journey. And we've thought of loads more things that we want to do now that probably weren't that prevalent 3 years ago. I think when we started, neurodiversity wasn't such a big thing. It wasn't talked about so much. You know, certainly invisible disabilities has come higher on the agenda, acquired disabilities, yeah, so there's lots that we're doing now and starting, you know, and keep driving. So it's a constant journey. And I think, you know, I guess the great thing about having to be re-accredited with Disability Confident, it makes sure it stays on your agenda. So, you know, we're all busy people. There's lots of agendas in the inclusion world. So it's easy sometimes to tick the box, get through something and then forget it. But I would say keep going on the journey, and keep driving forward. And I think, you know, it's not so scary when you start the journey, would be my top tip, is get going, start somewhere, and you'll be surprised how, you know, I don't want to say it's easy, because it hasn't been easy, but it's been really rewarding. And I think it's been a great journey to go on. So get started. And I would, you know, if anybody on the call hasn't already done so, Disability Confident Committed is a really good starting point. Level 1, you don't need any external assessments at that stage. You just sign up that you're going to start on the journey and start developing your action plan. So that is something that everyone on this call could do, and do really quickly, because it isn't something that's really scary. The link there below just takes you to the DWP website, which has got loads more information about how you could start your journey of becoming Disability Confident. And it's also got the criteria, so you can have a little look at it, and see what you need to do. And there's just some thoughts there about, you know, Disability Confident Committed. So you just have to sign up to say you're committed to trying to make a difference in those top sort of areas. So being inclusive and accessible recruitment, communicating your vacancies, offering interviews to disabled people, providing reasonable adjustments, and supporting existing employees. So, and again, it does say identify at least one action you could carry out to make a difference in those areas. And then it asks you to do an activity. And again, just identifying one at this stage, but looking at maybe work experience or work trials, paid employment or apprenticeships, job shadowing, traineeships or internships or student placements. And there is some great companies out there that will support you with all of them. So again, it's not that you've got to go out and find, you know, someone with a disability to do a work placement. If you contact your local sort of companies, we, as I say, use the British Association for Supported Employment, but there are lots of organisations out there, and say, we would like to offer some work experience, they will bite your hand off. They will be there saying, brilliant, let's come and talk about it. They will offer training for your line managers and people. They'll offer support with the, you know, the process. They'll offer, you know, they come and help set it all up. So, you know, we found that you don't need to do any of it by yourself. There's great organisations out there that will help you. But hopefully there you'll see, by doing, you know, one of the top and one of the bottom, that's what you need to do to start your journey. And I think, you know, we could all commit to doing something in each of those fields. So that's it for the presentation. I'm just going to stop sharing. And now I've got me just open the Q&A. So some questions that have come up on the sort of chat. So Dan, I'll sort of open them up to you. So the first one, Kathy, will the slides be shared? Most definitely, we can do that. I also know that Sarah is recording this webinar, so she will share the link, I'm sure, or it will come up on the supply chain sustainability website. So that will be there. We'll also we'll have and that leads on to a copy of the presentation being sent out, so that's there. So we've answered that one. Is the assessment framework available publicly? Yes, it's on that link. Daniel, do you want to talk a little bit about your assessment framework? Because I know that that's slightly separate to the Disability Confidant one, but there's a good tool there that organisations could use.
Yeah, cheers, Trace. So it's that's again the sort of disability smart audit. We actually have a self-assessment tool as well. So again, it's about benchmarking. It's seeing whereabouts you are at the moment on your journey. So it's about being honest with yourselves and then seeing where you can begin that journey, where you start to put things in place. So those were the 10 different business areas that I gave earlier. So what we do is we have that, first of all, we have that self-assessment, and then we support our members and our partners to sort of work towards a point where they want to take on the Disability Smart Audit. And that's where they will then complete an evidence all around those 10 different areas, which we will then review, and then like that will give that benchmark about where they are on their journey. So one thing, funny enough, I was thinking when you were talking about with your hints and tips as well there, Tracy, is about that one of the big things that we have as well at Business Disability Forum is our network. So we've got a construction network, we've also got our global task force, we've got tech task forces, we've got customer networks as well. So these bring together lots and lots of organizations. And what you find when you're talking, they're all run under Chatham House rules. So, you know, they're discussions that aren't recorded, but it's all of these different employers being able to have these conversations. And you'll find that an awful lot of people aren't, no one's really doing every single thing perfectly. And if you've got a challenge that you're encountering at the moment within your workplace, then you can be pretty sure that someone has already had that challenge. So you're not doing all of this on your own. You're able to then find that support and find what other solutions other organisations have had. So it was a sort of a little bit of a clarion call for what our organisation does. That's I think that's a good way to be able to bring people together. And that does then feed into that Disability Smart Audit as well, because again, you'll find different people, how they've done different things. And I think that speaks again to another question I can see coming up on this whole supply chain and using your influence, because it does depend kind of on the organisation that you're within. And again, through those networks, we can generally find someone that has already encountered such issues and how they've done that sort of thing.
Brilliant. Thank you, Daniel. Yes, and just sort of, I guess, going on from that, so how do you promote with your supply chain or use your influence to promote outside of your organization? I think for us, it's just keep talking about it. So, you know, events like today, we've encouraged our supply chain to come along and sent that out. We have regular communications with our supply chain, and we've sort of asked of all of our supply chain to become that level 1 committed. And I think, you know, we monitor how many of our supply chain are at that state, at which stage of the journey. So we've not got to a point where we're mandating it. We'd like to maybe in the future for our bigger strategic partners to say it's a condition of working with us, but we haven't got there yet. But we definitely are, you know, just keep talking about it, keep encouraging people to do it, and stressing the benefits of it really. And like Daniel said earlier, it's almost why wouldn't you? And why wouldn't you? For us, if it's something, you know, why wouldn't you become more disability inclusive? And if you're going to, why wouldn't you then follow the Disability Confident scheme that gets you accreditation and recognition for doing what you're doing anyway? So I think that would be my answer to that question. Couple more questions coming in, which is brilliant. Thank you very much. Daniel, have you got any thoughts about how do people find out if candidates got a disability? So I guess, you know, it's always that bit about declaration and finding out so that they can offer an interview. Any thoughts around best practice in that field?
Yeah, there's a line there between asking about if someone needs adjustments for interview and whether and then keeping separate sort of any sort of guaranteed interview scheme. Because generally what we would recommend all through our application, being able to say to people that you can offer adjustments. Do you need any adjustments to attend interview? And so that, and by sort of framing that as we want to make sure that everyone can operate to their full potential within interview. If you need any adjustments, such as, and then you could list what certain adjustments you have been able to provide before, whether that's sort of, you know, knowing who's going to be there, sort of questions that could be answered, asked. There are different things that you can have in terms of those adjustments, and then having a contact that person get in touch with, and feeding throughout the application process that is something that you recognise. So you're not asking about disability at all there, and then keeping guaranteed disability interview scheme separate. Yeah,
definitely. So I think and on our point of view, you know, we have a question on all our recruitment which asks people if they would like to be part of the guaranteed interview scheme. So like Daniel says, it's different from we make it clear that everybody has the right to request reasonable adjustments, but we have a specific question that states what the scheme is and ask people if they would like to be offered a guaranteed interview if they meet the minimum requirements. So we do keep those quite separate. We'll just, I know it's 11 o'clock, so I'm going to answer sort of one more question there, just to sort of pick up. I mean, certainly from our point of view, there was one about, do we mandate employees providing disability data? We don't mandate it. All of our data, we sort of we ask people to declare. We don't mandate it, and there's always a prefer not to say option. So we do that in two ways within Kier. We have it as part of employee records. So we ask people to state their characteristics as part of the recruitment process. We also do have, in order to give us better data, a once a year anonymous survey, which gives us, obviously are not against individuals, but it gives us more tools, more data across the organisation. So we find that that's really helpful. One gives us good data about individuals and how we can support them. One gives us an overall picture of the organisation, because we do get a much better declaration rate at the anonymous survey. Okay. Well, I'm aware that there's a few questions not answered, so apologies for that, but I'm also aware that we are at 11 o'clock. So in the sort of commitment not to overrun, we'll finish there. But if anybody does want to sort of, I guess, pose their questions offline or get any advice, further advice and support, myself and Daniel would be more than happy to answer them or support in any way. So thank you very much for your time today, and thank you for listening. Just to let you know, when we come out of the webinar today, you will be taken to the Supply Chain Sustainability sort of survey. It would be great to get your feedback on how you found today's webinar, and if there's anything else you'd like to learn or to be covered in future webinars. So thank you very much for your time. Yes, you'll go straight to the survey, and do get in touch if you'd like any further help or support. Brilliant. Thank you all.
Cheers. Thank you.